My own son, the boy I raised, looked me in the eye and spat, "You're not welcome at our Thanksgiving." After I poured every cent of my veteran's pension, my broken body savings, into his $3,000 a month mortgage for 6 years, he and his wife cast me out like garbage. They wanted a fancier dinner for her snobby parents, no place for a scarred soldier who bled for this country. My heart shattered, but my rage burned hotter. I stormed to my truck, made one call, and canceled their mortgage payments. You won't believe how I made them pay for their betrayal. Stay tuned, this is raw. I'm a retired Canadian Forces veteran, 20 years of service, from peacekeeping in Bosnia to dodging bullets in Afghanistan. My left leg still aches from a shrapnel wound, but I never complained. I poured my life into my son, Ethan Brooks, to give him the home I never had growing up in a cramped Victoria apartment. 6 years ago, I handed over $180,000 from my pension for the down payment on his dream house in Oak Bay, a stunning place with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Juan de Fuca Strait. Since then, I've wired $3,000 every month to cover their mortgage, while I scrape by in a 600-square-foot rental in Esquimalt, where the heater barely works and the stove's older than me. I didn't mind. It was for Ethan, for the promise I made to my late wife, Laura, to keep our boys safe. But last week, I called Ethan, excited to bring my venison stew to their Thanksgiving dinner, a recipe Laura used to call pure comfort in a bowl. His voice went flat. "Dad, Claire's parents, George and Helen, are hosting this year. They want a refined dinner, with proper wine pairings and all that. Your stew, your stories, they don't fit." My heart stopped. "What do you mean, don't fit?" I asked, gripping the phone. "Claire says it's best if you sit this one out," he mumbled. "Her folks prefer a certain vibe. That house, those windows, the fancy dining table Claire brags about on Instagram, all paid for with my sacrifice. And I wasn't welcome." I hung up the phone, Ethan's words echoing like a gunshot in my skull. "Your stew, your stories, they don't fit." The silence in my Esquimalt apartment was suffocating, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest until you can't breathe. I stumbled to the kitchen, my bad leg throbbing from that old shrapnel wound, and sank into a creaky chair. The fluorescent light flickered above, casting shadows on a faded photo of Laura, her smile frozen in time, taken at a Victoria Legion barbecue 20 years ago. She loved my venison stew, said it tasted like home, like family. Now, that home was gone, and I was an outcast in my own son's life. I stared at the chipped mug on the table, the one Laura bought at a Sydney flea market, and felt my heart crack open. For 6 years, I'd poured every dollar of my veteran's pension into Ethan's life, $180,000 for the down payment on his Oak Bay house, $3,000 a month for their mortgage, $10,000 for a new roof when a storm hit, even $5,000 for Claire's designer kitchen island because she needed it for entertaining. I'd skipped my own physiotherapy, let my apartment's pipes leak, and eaten canned soup to save every cent for them, all for Ethan, to honor the promise I made to Laura on her deathbed. "Keep our boy safe, Bill." I'd kept that promise, but at what cost? My dignity? My place in his world? Then my phone buzzed again, shattering the silence. Claire's name flashed on the screen, her voice dripping with fake sweetness when I answered. "Bill, I hope you're not upset about Thanksgiving," she said, like she was soothing a child. "George and Helen just want a sophisticated evening, with charcuterie boards and jazz playlists. Your war stories and that heavy stew, they'd make things awkward." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Awkward?" I repeated, my voice low, trembling. "Claire, I paid for your house, your fancy table, your whole damn lifestyle." She laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "Oh, Bill, don't be dramatic. You offered to help. It's not like we forced you. Besides, you're a bit Rough around the edges for our crowd. Rough around the edges. The words cut deeper than any bullet I took in Afghanistan. I was rough because I'd fought for this country, because I'd carried shrapnel in my leg for 20 years, because I'd worked my hands raw to give Ethan a life Laura would have been proud of. And now, I was nothing to them, a nuisance, a relic, a man whose sacrifices were laughed off like a bad joke. I ended the call, my hands shaking, and stared at Laura's photo. "I tried, Laura," I whispered, my voice breaking. I tried so hard. Tears burned my eyes, the first I'd shed since her funeral. I saw Ethan as a boy, running through Beacon Hill Park, laughing as I pushed him on the swings. That boy was gone, replaced by a stranger who'd chosen his wife's snooty parents over me. The apartment felt smaller, the walls closing in. Outside, Victoria's streetlights glowed faintly through the fog, mocking me with their warmth. I'd given everything, my savings, my health, my pride for a family that didn't want me. The pain was a physical weight, crushing my chest, worse than any wound from the battlefield. I wasn't just excluded from Thanksgiving, I was erased from their lives. But in that suffocating darkness, a spark of anger flickered. They thought they could discard me. They'd learn what happens when you betray a man who's already lost everything. The weight of Claire's words clung to me like damp Victoria fog as I sat in my Esquimalt apartment, the flickering kitchen light casting jagged shadows across Laura's faded photo. "Rough around the edges," she'd said, her voice dripping with condescension, as if my 20 years in the Canadian Forces, my scars, my sacrifices, were nothing but dirt to be swept under her polished Oak Bay rug. I'd given everything $180,000 for the down payment on Ethan's house, $3,000 a month for 6 years to keep their mortgage afloat, $10,000 for a new roof, $5,000 for Claire's precious kitchen island. I'd let my own life crumble, skipping doctor's visits for my aching leg, eating Dollarama canned beans to save every cent for them. And for what? To be told I didn't fit their sophisticated Thanksgiving. I stood, my bad leg protesting, and paced the cramped room. The pain in my chest wasn't just from Claire's cruelty, it was the betrayal of my own son, Ethan, who'd stood by silently as his wife dismissed me. I saw him as a boy, clutching my hand at the Victoria Remembrance Day ceremony, proud of his dad in uniform. That Ethan was gone, replaced by a man who let Claire and her parents, George and Helen Stewart, dictate his loyalties. I stopped pacing, my eyes landing on a stack of unopened mail bank statements, bills, reminders of the life I'd poured into their dream. I grabbed the pile, my hands shaking with a mix of rage and clarity, and started sorting. Each statement was a stab. $3,000 withdrawn on the 15th of every month, wired straight to their Wells Fargo account. 6 years, $216,000. More than I'd ever saved for my own retirement. My phone buzzed again, Claire's name flashing like a warning siren. I almost didn't answer, but something, maybe the last shred of hope, made me pick up. "Bill, I need you to cover the property taxes," she said. Her voice clipped, like she was ordering coffee at a Tim Hortons drive-thru. "It's $4,500 due next week. Ethan's stressed, and we're hosting George and Helen, so we can't deal with this now." I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound that surprised even me. "Claire, I'm not your bank," I said, my voice low but sharp. "You've taken enough." She scoffed, undeterred. "Don't be like that, Bill. You've always helped out. It's for Ethan's future. You know that." Her words were a blade, twisting deeper. Ethan's future. The same future I'd bled for, only to be kicked out of his Thanksgiving table. I hung up, my pulse pounding in my ears. I opened my laptop, the screen glowing in the dim apartment, and logged into my bank account. The automatic transfer stared back at me. $3,000, set to go out in 3 days. My finger hovered over the cancel button. I thought of Laura, her gentle voice promising we'd always be a family. I thought of the nights I'd lain awake, worrying about Ethan's bills while my own heat was shut off for non-payment. I thought of Claire's laugh, calling me rough around the edges, like I was some handyman she could dismiss. My jaw clenched, and I clicked cancel. The confirmation popped up. Transfer terminated. It felt like cutting a chain that had choked me for years, but I wasn't done. Claire and Ethan thought they could erase me, but they'd forgotten who I was, a man who'd survived war, who'd planned missions under pressure, who knew how to fight back. I opened a drawer, pulling out a dusty file folder stuffed with receipts and bank records. There it was, the $180,000 home equity loan for their down payment, the $10,000 check for the roof, the $5,000 credit card charge for Claire's kitchen island, even $2,000 for Ethan's new snow tires because Claire insisted their SUV needed the best. I spread the papers across my table, a map of my stupidity, my blind love for a son who'd turned his back on me. Then I opened Instagram, Claire's profile, a gallery of smug perfection, photos of their Oak Bay house captioned, "Our happy place number blessed." A shot of her sipping wine in Banff, paid for with the $6,000 I'd sent last winter when Ethan lost his job for a month. Every post was a lie, a glittering facade built on my sacrifice. My anger burned hotter, but it wasn't reckless, it was sharp, focused, like lining up a target in my old rifle scope. I started downloading her posts, saving screenshots, building a case. They wanted a refined Thanksgiving without me? Fine. I'd show their guests exactly who paid for their charcuterie boards and jazz playlists. I leaned back, the chair creaking under me, and stared at the ceiling. Victoria's foghorn wailed in the distance, a lonely sound that matched the ache in my bones. But something had shifted. The pain was still there, raw and heavy, but it was fuel now. I wasn't just a broken veteran anymore. I was a man with a plan, and Claire and Ethan were about to learn what happens when you betray someone who's already lost everything. Their perfect little world was about to crack, and I'd be the one holding the hammer. The November fog clung to my jacket as I parked my rusty pickup across from Ethan and Claire's Oak Bay mansion, its floor-to-ceiling windows glowing with warm light from their Thanksgiving feast. Inside, laughter and clinking glasses mocked the cold emptiness in my chest. I'd spent 6 years bankrolling this house, $180,000 for the down payment, $216,000 in mortgage payments, $10,000 for a new roof, $5,000 for Claire's kitchen island, even $2,000 for their snow tires. Yet here I was, a 6'2" veteran with a shrapnel-scarred leg, deemed too rough for their refined dinner. My hands tightened around a briefcase stuffed with bank statements, receipts, and screenshots of Claire's Instagram posts flaunting her blessed life. Tonight, their guests would see the truth. I stepped out, the gravel crunching under my boots, and crossed the street. The front door was unlocked, typical of Claire's obsession with showing off their safe neighborhood. I pushed it open, the scent of roasted turkey and expensive wine hitting me like a slap. The dining room was a spectacle. A long oak table draped in white linen, crystal glasses sparkling under a chandelier I'd paid for, and 15 guests in tailored suits and dresses, laughing over plates of artisanal stuffing. Ethan sat at one end, his face pale as he spotted me. Claire, in a silk dress, froze mid-sentence, her wineglass trembling. George and Helen Stewart, her parents, turned with identical frowns, their polished Victoria Country Club manners on full display. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice steady as I set my briefcase on the marble sideboard, another $3,000 of my pension. "I hope you're enjoying the meal in the house I paid for." The room went silent, forks pausing mid-air. Claire recovered first, her voice sharp. "Bill, this is inappropriate. You need to leave." I ignored her, opening the briefcase and pulling out neatly stacked folders. "Before I go, I think your guests deserve to know who's really funding this lifestyle." I walked around the table, placing a folder in front of each guest. These are bank records. $180,000 for the down payment, $216,000 in mortgage payments over 6 years, $10,000 for the roof, $5,000 for that kitchen island Claire loves to photograph. Murmurs rippled through the room. Nancy Carter, a friend of Claire's from her yoga studio, flipped open her folder, her eyes widening at the highlighted bank statements. "Claire, is this true?" she asked, her voice sharp with disbelief. "Did Bill pay for all this?" Claire's face flushed, her perfect hostess mask cracking. "It's not what it looks like," she stammered. "Bill volunteered to help. We never asked." Ethan stared at his plate, his shoulders hunched, saying nothing. George Stewart stood, his voice booming with indignation. "This is outrageous. You barge in here, disrupting a family gathering with your accusations. Who do you think you are?" "I'm the man who paid for this house," I said, locking eyes with him. "The man who skipped physiotherapy for my war injury so your daughter could have her sophisticated life. The man you called too rough for your Thanksgiving table." Helen Stewart clutched her pearls, her voice icy. "You're embarrassing yourself, Bill. This is a private matter." I laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "Private? Like when Claire told me my venison stew and war stories didn't fit your jazz playlists? Or when she laughed and called me a handyman?" I turned to the guests, their faces shifting from shock to discomfort. "Every cent of this dinner, this chandelier, this perfect Oak Bay life, it's mine. My pension, my sacrifice." "Oh?" A gray-haired man in a blazer, likely a colleague of George's, scanned a receipt and shook his head. "Claire, you said you and Ethan bought this place with your savings. What's going on?" Claire's voice rose, desperate. "He's twisting it. Bill wanted to help Ethan, for Laura's sake." At Laura's name, my chest tightened. "Don't you dare bring Laura into this," I said, my voice low, dangerous. "She'd be ashamed of what you've done to our family." I placed a final folder in front of Nancy. "Look at Claire's Instagram. Banff trips, new SUVs, designer dresses, all paid with my money while I ate canned beans in Esquimalt." The room was a graveyard of silence, the guests' eyes darting between the folders and Claire's crumbling facade. Ethan finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Dad, I didn't mean—" But I cut him off. "You meant it, Ethan. You chose her family over me." I straightened, my bad leg aching but my resolve ironclad. "Enjoy your dinner, everyone. It's the last one I'll ever pay for." I turned and walked out, the door clicking shut behind me. The fog outside felt lighter than the weight I'd carried for years. Claire's world was unraveling, and I wasn't done yet. The echo of the Oak Bay Mansion's door clicking shut behind me lingered as I drove back to my Esquimalt apartment through Victoria's fog-soaked streets. My heart pounded, not with pain anymore, but with the sharp clarity of a soldier who'd just won a skirmish. Exposing Claire and Ethan's lies at their Thanksgiving dinner felt good, but I knew their kind people like Claire and her parents, George and Helen Stewart, didn't crumble easily. They'd fight back, and I was ready. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a notification from the Times Colonist. The headline hit me like a punch. "Veteran abandons family at Thanksgiving, leaves hosts in chaos." My blood boiled. The article painted me as a bitter, unstable ex-soldier who'd stormed into a peaceful family gathering to harass Ethan and Claire with baseless accusations. Claire's words dripped from the page, quoted verbatim. "Bill's been struggling since his military days. We tried to include him, but his outburst was dangerous." Dangerous. The word burned. I'd faced Taliban gunfire in Kandahar, carried shrapnel in my leg for 20 years, and poured $400,000 into their lives, $180,000 for their house's down payment, $216,000 in mortgage payments, $10,000 for a roof, $5,000 for Claire's kitchen island. And now I was dangerous? Claire had spun her web, using her parents' Victoria Country Club connections to plant this smear with a journalist, some hack named Amanda Reed who clearly hadn't checked her facts. The article didn't mention my sacrifices, my pension, or the truth I'd laid bare at their dinner. It was a calculated strike, meant to destroy my name in a city where reputation is everything, especially among veterans who gather at the Victoria Legion. I slammed my laptop shut, my bad leg throbbing as I paced the apartment. The pain wasn't just physical, it was the betrayal, sharper now than ever. Claire thought she could bury me with a newspaper hit piece, turn me into the villain while she played the victim. She'd forgotten who I was, a man who'd planned missions under pressure, who'd outsmarted enemies smarter than her. I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd eaten canned beans to save money for their mortgage, and opened my briefcase. The folders from the dinner were still there, bank statements, receipts, screenshots of Claire's Instagram flaunting trips to Tofino and Whistler, all funded by my pension. I wasn't done fighting. I drafted a letter to the Times Colonist, my hand steady despite the rage coursing through me. To the editor, I began. I'm William Thompson, a Canadian Forces veteran who served this country for 20 years. Your recent article about me is a lie. I laid out the truth. $400, 0-inch payments for Ethan and Claire's Oak Bay home, my skipped medical treatments to cover their bills, their exclusion of me from Thanksgiving because my war stories and venison stew weren't refined enough for George and Helen's tastes. I attached scanned copies of every receipt, $180,000 for the down payment, $10,000 for the roof, $2,000 for snow tires, and screenshots of Claire's posts, each one a glittering lie about her hard-earned lifestyle. I sent copies to the Victoria Legion and the local Veterans Association, knowing my brothers in arms would understand betrayal better than anyone. 2 days later, the Times Colonist published my letter on the front page. Veteran sets record straight. I paid $400,000 for son's home, only to be banned from Thanksgiving. The response was electric. My phone buzzed with messages from fellow veterans, some I hadn't spoken to since my service days. "Bill, we've got your back," one wrote. By noon, a dozen Legion members had gathered outside Ethan and Claire's house, holding signs that read, "Respect our vets," and "Shame on you." Social media erupted. Claire's Instagram was flooded with comments calling her out. "You took his money and threw him out." Her latest brand deal with a Victoria boutique fell apart when the owner, a veteran's daughter, saw the posts. Claire's perfect facade was cracking, and the community was watching. I stood on my apartment's tiny balcony, the Juan de Fuca Strait barely visible through the fog. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of betrayal lift, replaced by the pride of a soldier who'd fought and won. Claire thought a newspaper could break me, but I'd survived worse than her lies. "I fought for this country," I said to myself, my voice steady, "and I'll fight for my dignity." The battle wasn't over, but I'd drawn blood, and Victoria would never look at Claire and Ethan the same way again. The fog had lifted from Victoria's streets, and for the first time in years, so had the weight on my shoulders. My letter in the Times Colonist had turned the tables, exposing Ethan and Claire's betrayal to the world. Their Oak Bay mansion, once a symbol of their perfect life, was now a prison of their own making. By mid-December, the bank sent a notice of default $9,000 in missed mortgage payments since I'd canceled the $3,000 monthly transfers. The house I'd funded with $180,000 for the down payment and $216,000 over 6 years was slipping through their fingers. Claire's Instagram, once a shrine to her curated lifestyle, went silent. No more posts of wine-soaked sunsets or kayak trips on the Juan de Fuca Strait. Her brand deal with that Victoria boutique was dead, and her so-called friends, like Nancy Carter, stopped calling. The community's judgment was swift. Victoria doesn't forgive those who disrespect its veterans. I drove past their house one chilly morning, seeing a "for sale" sign staked in the front yard. The windows I'd paid to replace after a storm looked dull, lifeless, like the facade Claire had built. I didn't gloat, but I felt a quiet satisfaction, the kind that comes from knowing justice has teeth. My own life, though, was blooming. With the $3,000 a month no longer bleeding from my account, I fixed the leaky pipes in my Esquimalt apartment, bought a new electric heater, and even splurged on a sturdy mountain bike to ride along Dallas Road. For the first time since Laura's passing, I ate fresh salmon instead of canned beans, cooked on a stove that didn't spark with every use. I started physiotherapy again for my shrapnel-scarred leg, the pain easing with each session. The money I'd poured into Ethan's life was finally mine again, and I was rebuilding, piece by piece. Then Ethan showed up at my door, unannounced, on a rainy December evening. His tailored coat was wrinkled, his eyes sunken, a far cry from the confident man who'd sat silently at Claire's Thanksgiving table. "Dad," he said, his voice barely above the patter of rain, "we're losing the house. Claire's a mess. I messed up." I leaned against the door frame, my face unreadable. "You think?" I said, my tone flat. He looked down, his hands stuffed in his pockets. "I didn't know Claire would go to the papers. I didn't know she'd hurt you like that." I let the silence stretch, heavy as the fog that had once choked me. "You knew, Ethan," I said finally. "You knew when you told me my venison stew didn't fit. You knew when you let George and Helen treat me like dirt." He flinched, his voice cracking. "I was wrong, Dad. I let Claire and her parents control me. I should have stood up for you." I studied him, seeing traces of the boy who'd saluted me at the Victoria Remembrance Day parade years ago. But that boy was gone, buried under years of choices that put Claire's wants over my sacrifices. "You made your bed, Ethan," I said, not unkindly. "Now lie in it. You're a grown man. Figure it out." He nodded, tears mixing with the rain on his face, and walked back to his car. I closed the door, the click final, like a lock snapping shut on a past I'd carried too long. Back inside, I poured a mug of coffee and stood by my window, watching the rain streak across the glass. The pain of Ethan's betrayal still lingered, but it no longer defined me. I'd fought for Canada, for Laura, for Ethan. Now, I was fighting for myself. The Victoria Legion had invited me to their Christmas potluck, and I'd already planned to bring Laura's venison stew recipe. This time, I'd be surrounded by people who valued me, not my bank account. The future wasn't just bright, it was mine to shape. The rain had stopped, and a rare December sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over Victoria's Juan de Fuca Strait. I stood on my Esquimalt apartment's balcony, a mug of strong coffee warming my hands, the ache in my shrapnel-scarred leg softer now, thanks to the physiotherapy I could finally afford. For 6 years, I'd poured my Canadian Forces pension into Ethan and Claire's Oak Bay mansion, $180,000 for the down payment, $216,000 in mortgage payments, thousands more for their roof, kitchen island, and snow tires. I'd eaten canned beans, let my pipes leak, and skipped doctor's visits to keep their dream alive, only to be told I was too rough for their Thanksgiving table. But now, with their house facing foreclosure and Claire's socialite facade shattered by my Times Colonist letter, I was free. The weight of betrayal, once a crushing stone, had crumbled to dust. This ordeal taught me a hard truth, one I wish I'd learned before Laura passed. Family isn't defined by blood or promises. It's defined by respect. I fought for Canada in Afghanistan, carried scars for my country. But the toughest battle was here, in Victoria, fighting for my own dignity. Ethan chose Claire's world of charcuterie boards and jazz playlists over the father who gave everything. Claire and her parents, George and Helen, saw me as a wallet, not a man. But standing up at their dinner, in that newspaper, showed me I'm more than my sacrifices. I'm a veteran who knows his worth, and no one can take that away. If you're out there, maybe a fellow veteran or someone who's poured their heart into people who didn't value it, hear this. You are enough. You don't need to bankrupt yourself, your savings, your spirit to prove your love. Set boundaries. Say no when it protects your soul. Walk away from those who make you feel small, because you deserve a seat at the table, not scraps from it. I learned to stop chasing approval from people who'd never give it. Instead, I found family in the Victoria Legion, where old soldiers share stories over beers, not judgment. They don't care if my venison stew isn't refined enough, they eat it with a smile and ask for seconds. This Christmas, I'm not spending it alone in a cold apartment, wondering why Ethan didn't call. I'm joining the Legion's potluck, bringing Laura's venison stew, the one she said tasted like love. I'll sit with men and women who've seen the same battles I have, who know what it means to fight and keep fighting. My apartment's pipes are fixed. My heater hums warmly, and my new mountain bike leans against the wall, ready for a ride along Dallas Road. I'm 62, and for the first time in years, I'm living for me. The future isn't just a dream, it's a promise I'm keeping to myself, to Laura, to the man I've always been. Look at your own life. Who's taking more than they give? Who's making you feel like you don't belong? You've got the strength to change that. Maybe it's a tough conversation. Maybe it's walking away, but do it. You're not just a veteran, a parent, or a friend. You're a person who deserves respect. Take it from me. When you stand up for yourself, the world listens, and it feels damn good to finally be heard. The December sun dips low over Victoria's Juan de Fuca Strait, painting the waves with a quiet gold that feels like a promise kept. I'm standing here, in my Esquimalt apartment, a mug of coffee in hand, no longer weighed down by the betrayal that once choked me. For 6 years, I poured my veteran's pension $400,000, every cent of my sacrifice into a son who turned his back on me, into a house that locked me out of Thanksgiving. Ethan's choice, Claire's cruelty, and the smug judgment of George and Helen cut deeper than the shrapnel still lodged in my leg. But I stood up, not just for me, but for the man Laura believed I could be. I fought back, first at their polished Oak Bay dinner, then in the pages of the Times Colonist, and I found my worth again, surrounded by the Victoria Legion brothers who welcomed my venison stew with open hearts. This story isn't just mine, it's for anyone who's ever felt pushed aside, used, or forgotten. Maybe you're a veteran, like me, who gave everything for others, only to be told you're not enough. Maybe you're someone who's poured your soul into a family, a friend, a dream, and got nothing but silence in return. I see you. I know that pain, the kind that makes you question your own heart, but I also know the strength it takes to stand tall, to say no more, and to choose yourself. That's why I'm sharing this with you, here on Maple Revenge, where stories like ours find a voice. If this story hit you, if it stirred something deep, anger, pain, or maybe a spark of hope, drop a like on this video. It's not just a click, it's a nod to everyone who's fought to be seen. Leave a comment below and tell me your story. Have you ever been shut out by the people you loved most? How did you find your way back to yourself? Your words might be the light someone else needs in their darkest moment. And if you want to hear more stories of resilience, of people like us who rise above betrayal, hit that subscribe button for Maple Revenge. Click the bell too so you don't miss the next one, because I've got more to share. Stories of battles fought not on fields but in hearts and homes. Let's keep this going. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, a friend, a fellow veteran, anyone who's felt invisible. Let them know they're not alone. We're building something here, a place where the truth matters, where respect isn't a favor but a right. I'll be back next week with another story from Victoria's streets about a man who faced down his own kind of betrayal. Until then, hold your head high. You're worth more than the scraps they offer. And from one fighter to another, thank you for listening.